free to sing along. We start with the word if, and we move on from there. If I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning, I'd hammer in the evening, all over this land. I'd hammer out danger, I'd hammer out warning, I'd hammer out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Ooh, if I had a bell, I'd ring it in the morning, I'd ring it in the evening, all over this land. I'd ring out danger, I'd ring out warning, I'd ring out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Ooh, if I had a song, I'd sing it in the morning, I'd sing it in the evening, all over this land. I'd sing out danger, I'd sing out warning, I'd sing out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Now I have a hammer, and I've got a bell, and I've got a song to sing all over this land. It's a song of justice, it's the bell of freedom, it's a song about love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land.
Have you ever seen this book? You have? Have you seen it? Yeah? We're gonna go through this story one more time. Has anybody grown up seen this story? Enemy pie. What's that about? And there's all kinds of worms and bad things coming out of this pie. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a treehouse in our backyard. My sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks. And I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been a perfect summer, but it wasn't. It was all good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood, right next door to my best friend Stanley. I didn't like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when I struck out in a baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline, and I wasn't even invited, but my best friend Stanley was. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never had a need for an enemy list until he moved in. But as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it up in my treehouse where Jeremy Ross was not allowed to go. There he's hanging it up. Dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too. But he knew of a way to get rid of them. I asked him to tell me how. Tell you how? I'll show you how. He pulled out a really old recipe from a book on the shelf. Inside there was a worn scrap of paper with faded writing. Enemy pie. You may be wondering what exactly is enemy pie. I was wondering too. But Dad said the recipe was no secret. He couldn't even so secret he couldn't even tell me. I decided it must be magic. I begged him to tell me something, anything. I'll tell you this, he said. Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of enemies. What kinds of things, disgusting things, would I put in a pie for an enemy? Earthworms? Weeds? Rocks? But my dad said, I don't eat any of those. I gave him the gum I'd been chewing all morning, but he gave it right back to me. I went out to play alone. All the while, I listened to the sounds of my dad cooking, chopping, stirring, blending ingredients for enemy pie. This could be a great summer after all. Enemy pie was going to be awful. I tried to imagine how horrible it must smell, or worse, what it would look like. But when I was in my backyard looking for ladybugs, I smelled something really, really good. As far as I could tell, it was coming from our kitchen. I was confused. I went in to ask Dad what was wrong. Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good. But Dad was smart. If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy would never eat it, would he? I could tell he'd made enemy pie before. The buzzer rang. Dad pulled out the oven mitts and pulled the pie out of the oven. It looked like plain old pie. It looked good enough to eat. But still, I wasn't really sure how this enemy pie worked. What exactly did it do to enemies? Maybe it made their hair fall out or their breath smell stinky. Maybe it made bullies cry. Dad wouldn't tell me anything. While the pie cooled, he filled me in on my job. There's one part of enemy pie that I can't do. In order for it to work, you have to spend a day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but that's the only way enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Of course I was. It sounded horrible. It was scary, but it was worth a try. All I had to do was spend one day with Jeremy Ross. Then he'd be out of my hair for the rest of my life. I rode my bike to his house, and I knocked on the door. When Jeremy opened the door, he looked surprised. He stood on the other side of the screen door and looked at me, waiting for me to say something. Can you play? He looked confused. I'll go ask my mom. He came back with shoes in his hand. His mom walked around the corner to say hello. You boys stay out of trouble. And there's Jeremy and his friend, well, his enemy. We rode bikes for a while and played on the trampoline. Then we made some water balloons and threw them at the neighbors' girls, but we missed. Jeremy's mom made us lunch. After lunch, we went to my house. It was strange, but I was kind of having fun with my enemy. He almost seemed nice. But of course, I couldn't tell Dad that since he worked so hard to make this enemy pie. Jeremy Ross liked my basketball hoop. He said he wished he had a basketball hoop, but they didn't have room for one. I let him win a game just to be nice. Jeremy Ross knew how to throw a boomerang. I threw it and it went over the fence into the backyard. When we climbed the fence to find it, Jeremy noticed my treehouse. My treehouse was my treehouse. I was the boss. If my sister wanted in, I didn't have to let her. If my dad wanted in, I didn't have to let him. And if Jeremy wanted in, can we go in? He asked. I knew he was going to ask that. And enemies aren't allowed in my treehouse. And he was the only person on my enemy list. But he did teach me how to throw a boomerang. And he did have me over for lunch. He wasn't being a very good enemy. Okay, I said, but hold on. I scrambled up into the treehouse and tore the enemy list off the wall. I had a checkerboard and some cards in the treehouse, and we played games until my dad called us for dinner. Dad made us macaroni and cheese for dinner, my favorite. It was Jeremy's favorite, too. They're eating macaroni and cheese together. Maybe Jeremy Ross wasn't so bad after all. I was beginning to think maybe we should just forget enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought out the pie and he cut a whole bunch of big pieces. And I said, Dad, it sure is nice having a new friend in the neighborhood. I was trying to get his attention, trying to tell him that Jeremy Ross was no longer my enemy. I think he thought I was pretending. Dad dished up 3 plates side by side with big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream. He passed one to me and Jeremy. Wow, Jeremy said, look at the pie. My dad never makes pies like that. It was at this point that I panicked. I didn't want Jeremy to eat the enemy pie. He was my friend. I couldn't let him eat it. Jeremy, don't eat. It's bad pie. I think it's poisonous. Jeremy's fork stopped. He crumpled his eyebrows and looked at me funny. I had just saved his life. I was a hero. There they are eating the pie. If it's so bad, Jeremy asked, then why is your dad eating half the pie already? Good stuff. I sat there watching them eat enemy pie for a few seconds. Dad was laughing. Jeremy was happy. Neither of them was losing any hair. I took a tiny taste. Enemy pie was delicious. After dessert, Jeremy rode his bike home, but not before inviting me to play with him the next morning. As for enemy pie, I still don't know how to make it. I still wonder if enemies really do hate it, or if their hair falls out or their breath turns bad. But I don't know if I'll ever get an answer, because I just lost my best enemy.
You remember when you pushed your dreams aside? The road became so narrow, it used to seem so wide. Afraid of what that said, afraid to lose it all. You kept it all inside these blue-skied painted walls. Where was I when you decided? On a day just like today, maybe we can see a change. Doesn't have to be the same as it's always been. Still gotta write the rest of our history. We can't look the other way. On a day just like today. Your eyes are telling me the things you haven't said. Should I just pretend that maybe it's all for the best? If you traded in your flower for something watered down, help me recognize just where the flame is now. What better time to decide it? On a day just like today, maybe we can see a change. It doesn't have to be the same as it's always been. Still gotta write the rest of our history. We can look the other way. On a day just like today, maybe we can see a change. It doesn't have to be the same as it's always been. We still gotta write the rest of our history. we can't look the other way on a day just like today. On a day just like today. On a day just like today. On a day just like today.
Our reading is from Clarissa Pinkola Estes. I urge you, ask you, gentle you, please to not spend your spirit dry by bewailing these difficult times. Especially, do not lose hope. We are definitely the leaders we've been waiting for. In any dark time, there is a tendency to veer toward fainting over how much is wrong or unmended in the world, to fall into being weakened by dwelling on what's outside your reach, by what cannot yet be. That is spending the wind without raising the sails. Ours is not the task of fixing the entire world all at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within reach. Any small, calm thing that one soul can do to help another soul, to assist some portion of this poor, suffering world, will help immensely. It is not given to us to know which acts or by whom will cause the critical mass to tip toward the enduring good. What is needed for dramatic change is an accumulation of acts, adding to, adding more. We know it does not take everyone on earth to bring justice and peace, but only a small, determined group. One of the most calming and powerful actions you can do to intervene in a storming world is to stand up and show your soul. Soul on deck shines like gold in dark times. To display the lantern of soul in shadowy times like these, to be fierce and to show mercy toward others, both are acts of immense bravery and greatest necessity. Good morning. I feel in a very special way honored to be here today because it's been quite a week and quite a year. So I feel like you've trusted me to be here on today, a week after a lot of big things have happened. How do we navigate in a changing world? As together we face an unknown future, some inner urging tells me to share some stories, one especially that for at least a decade I was really afraid to tell. But it feels like a story whose time has come. During a 4-year body-centered psychotherapy training, 60 of us learned to trust our emotions as clues to how the clients felt. A professional actress once arrived for her massage and came in all, "I'm fine." But I felt something wasn't right. And I took her into the massage room. When she got settled, I went back in the room, and instead of starting the way I normally did on her head, I just slipped my hands under her heart, and she immediately started to sob. Another client came in, and I felt a significant drop in my mood every time she came in, though she reported being fine. After 4 weeks of this, 4 Fridays, I said, "Are you sure?" And she broke down in tears. She had a stepdaughter that was threatening suicide, and it had been really eating her up all that time. At massage school in 1995, I met Angela. One day I arrived to find several classmates gathered around, and she was sobbing. Her husband, Mike, when I met him and their 2 sons, they were the ideal, happy family. But now he had a cancer relapse. The next day on my walk, I could not get Angela out of my mind. My husband and I were in perfect health, yet the darkness of divorce loomed over us. I felt it so unfair that Angela's loving family should have to endure such hardship. So I prayed for them, not the prayer of supplication that I learned in childhood, but rather feeling such a feeling of love and letting go of expectations for the outcome. The image of Angela's happy family blazed in my mind's eye. Love just filled me up, growing with every inhale until I just felt like I was glowing. I wanted their happiness every bit as much as I wanted my own. I asked for 2 feathers, one for Angela, one for Mike, as symbols of their courage facing another enormous challenge. In my mind's eye, I envisioned Mike on the operating table and Angela sitting on a bench with tears spilling in her upturned hands. At the end of my walk, I found 2 feathers. I slipped a single white feather and its beige striped companion into an envelope along with a note to the couple. I explained the Native American understanding that feathers are given as an honor for courageous acts because they carry messages from the Great Spirit. I told them I prayed for their comfort and strength. The following Thursday was Mike's surgery. When I arrived at class on Friday, I asked Debbie, a close friend of Angela's, how Mike was. "Robin, let's go someplace and talk." She ushered me to the ladies' room with such urgency I expected the worst. Mike died, I thought. She pointed to a bench. "You'll need to be sitting when I tell you what I have to tell you." Angela and Mike said to say thank you for the feathers and the note. "He's doing well, Robin. What did you do?" "What do you mean?" "I prayed for them." Debbie continued. "Angela told me that while Mike was in surgery, she went outside the hospital to wait on a bench. She sat there worrying, her hands in her lap, when a white feather fluttered down and landed in her hands. She said it comforted her because of what you wrote about feathers. When I heard that, you could have knocked me over with a feather." Here she described the image from my walk, but with a feather instead of tears, and no one knew about it until now. Debbie said again, "What did you do?" As though I had performed some outlandish magic trick. For the rest of the day, visions of Angela and the stunned look on Debbie's face flashed in and out of my consciousness, and I had trouble concentrating. The next day, Saturday, Debbie came in wide-eyed and asked again, "What did you do?" I said, I told you I prayed. That's all I did. Debbie said, "You better sit down while I tell you what happened yesterday." Last night, Angela was home giving instructions to her mom, who was there to babysit while Angela went to the hospital. As she talked to her mom, Angela rushed back and forth from the kitchen to the deck where she was grilling hot dogs for the boys' dinner. She didn't want to be late for her visit with Mike, and her hands started to shake. On her last trip from the deck to the house, she reached for the sliding glass door and spotted a feather stuck in the molding next to her hand. She lifted it from the doorframe, took a deep breath, and calmed down as she remembered that a feather is a messenger from the Great Spirit. "That's amazing," I said in a startled kind of haze. "Wait, it gets better," she said. When Angela was driving to go visit Mike, her mind started to race. She was anxious to get to his side and worried about leaving the boys for too long. She was lost in thought and not focused on driving. Suddenly, she found herself bearing down on the rear end of another car so fast that it seemed to have materialized out of nowhere. She slammed on the brake and stopped within inches of the car in front of her. She stared at the license plate. It said feather. At this point, I thought I might faint, and tears welled in my eyes. Debbie wasn't finished. "Here's the icing on the cake." Later, Mike's mom joined them at the hospital. She said, "Wait till I tell you what just happened." She had gone to church to say prayers and light a candle. When she came out of the building, the air was still. She stepped down 2 or 3 stairs, stopped, opened her purse to look for something. A gust of wind blew across, carrying a feather that landed right in her purse. Mike's mom knew nothing of your feather gifts to Angela and Mike or any of the other things that have happened. The shock of what I just heard held me in a fog. Had I known which direction to face, I would have knelt down and bowed toward Mecca. Once I had time to process these events, I realized an extraordinary thing had occurred, and I puzzled over it for years. This was no New Age concept. It was a reality for me and several witnesses. My conclusion after numerous experiences like these is that emotions function like electricity. Emotions aid communication. Emotions are ancient tools that we all have to tell us what's happening in the world and within ourselves. After our initial emotional impressions, judgment may kick in as feelings of fear, sadness, joy, anger, trust, or disgust. After experiencing a class of 60 people who transformed their emotions and feelings, I know it's possible to become skilled at using emotion as a tool. Learn to identify our judgments and then employ acts of love. The most essential thing I learned is that we're all intimately connected, and what affects one person affects all on some level, whether for good or for bad. Thousands, millions of ears are changed by the strum of one guitar chord, just as masses are forever altered by the release of a trigger that takes one life. When we want love, peace, comfort, and sustenance for others as much as we want those things for ourselves, the forces of nature conspire with us to make it so. Miracles are nothing unusual. All it takes is focused intention, and they become a daily experience. Sufi teacher Irina Tweedy said, the realization that every act, every word, every thought of ours not only influences our environment, but for some mysterious reason forms an integral and important part of the universe, fits into it as if by necessity, so to say, in the very moment we do or say or think it, is an overwhelming and even shattering experience. The tremendous responsibility of it is terrifying. If all of us only knew that the smallest act of ours or a tiny thought has such far-reaching effects as to set in motion forces which perhaps could shatter a galaxy, if we knew it deeply and absolutely, if this realization becomes engraved permanently on our hearts, on our minds, how careful we would act and speak and think. How precious life would become in its integral oneness. Scientists are working to prove that animals, plants, humans have a shared energetic field. They speculate that human emotion moves through this field, and every emotion experienced by one individual is felt by every other, like ripples on a pond. The media preys on our proven negativity bias. Has anybody heard of that? We're sort of destined to think of the negative first, caveman days. By inflating bad news and predicting doom. When we believe proclamations of devastation and negative outcomes, we may feel threatened, scared, outraged, hopeless, and drained of any energy to do anything about it. You cannot feel fear and anger at the same time that you feel peace and love. It does not mean anger will never arise, or that we should sit back and do nothing. Being conscious about our emotions and feelings and meeting challenges with love gives us great power to change things. A book I remembered from childhood called If Everybody Did by Joanne Stover suggests that the combined actions of many cause an even greater result than the action of one. I think we pretty much know that that's true when we join together. Pairing my childhood book, If Everybody Did, with my experiences, I thought, what if we did things differently from the way they've always been done together? What if the proclamations of doom we allow to overwhelm us leak out through that collective energy field and prevent a situation from being any other way? It's a question I'm still asking. What if we work toward transforming our feelings of anger and fear into loving actions that far outweigh the acts of evil? What if focusing on what we want instead of what we don't want helps a situation conclude in a satisfying way? What if nurturing loving thoughts about others leads to deep listening and healing dialogue? What if we carry the inherent worth and dignity of every person in our hearts at all times and look for God in every human face? Marianne Williamson was onto something when she said, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us most. As we conclude here today, I invite you to close your eyes if you're comfortable doing so for just a minute or two. Imagine a sweet newborn baby. See if you can picture that baby in your mind's eye. The baby is in your arms and you're rocking, comforting. You're giving him love, nurturing, that all babies need. Are you feeling the love for that baby? Now, just for 30 seconds, let's go back in time. This child will one day be a corrupt political figure, a public figure, a white supremacist, or anyone with an opposing viewpoint. But you see only the innocent baby they once were. Lift a hand to your heart. Hold that child tenderly. Tell him he's loved and cared for and really feel it. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. I imagine that was a rather difficult thing to do. For some, maybe not for all. What if we consider that the enemy is human and faces their own inner demons? Even when it doesn't seem like it. What if, as they face difficult choices, we focus on love and send it their way? Gandhi said, "The future depends on what we do in the present. If a single person achieves the highest kind of love, it will be sufficient to neutralize the hate of millions." Martin Luther King Jr. said, "It is love that will save our world and our civilization. Love, even for enemies." What if you realize there is a Gandhi or a Martin Luther King inside of you? Thank you.